Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. As many of you know, I forecasted that magnitude 8.8 megaquake 3 days in advance on my channel. I put a magnitude range of 8.5 to 9, saying that was a likely possibility in the Kamchatka Peninsula area as a result of the seismic activity that had been unfolding. Well, then on July 29th, nearly at midnight, we had that magnitude 8.8 earthquake. The lowest magnitude rating given to that is by the Russians at a magnitude 8.4. Everyone else is at magnitude 8.6 to 8.8. A big earthquake caused extensive damage in Crescent City, the largest ever tsunami record that they've had. Of course, the waves also washed up to Japan and Hawaii and caused extensive damage to the Kamchatka Peninsula itself and the residents living there. And exactly after that happened, we had Shiveluch volcano erupt on the Kamchatka Peninsula, followed by Kluchevskoye volcano. And this is the tallest and most active volcano in the Kamchatka Peninsula. And it's been sending up the biggest ash clouds going up over the past few days. These videos here are of Kamchatka volcano, which hasn't been active since around 1463 AD, plus or minus 40 years. And this was a massive eruption, sent the ash cloud up about 6,100 meters. And it's actually a double eruption because we had the summit eruption, as you see here, but then also this flank burst open. And so a lot of people are worried that there may be a large flank eruption from Kamchatka, just like Mount St. Helens in 1980. The way I look at this is that Kamchatka has woken up, is pissed, and has nothing to lose. And so it made us decide to just go totally nuts, because we also have Kluchevskoye volcano here. Shiveluch volcano erupted immediately after that magnitude 8.8. So did Kluchevskoye. It's been erupting since. If we look at our total radiative power for Kluchevskoye, we see that's been on this crazy uptrend. Going back to 2024, here it is right now. There you see that eruption immediately after that magnitude 8.8 megaquake right at the very end of July 29, 2025 UTC. So it's 23:24 UTC on July 29th, 2025. We see this beginning of August right there. That is that megaquake causing instabilities with Kluchevskoye, which is now at the absolute peak of its eruptive power, going back more than a year. But here's the thing. This was clearly fated to occur to some degree, because we see that this volcanic activity at Kluchevskoye actually is a precursor signal for that magnitude 8.8 megaquake. Look at how it went exponential, leading right to that massive reverse thrust fault, that mega thrust fault earthquake. So this is showing that there are deeper changes unfolding within our planet. And something that's very interesting is that a resonance has developed between the volcanoes on the Kamchatka Peninsula and our sun. So we have a sunspot group right here, 4168, and right above it is 4165. 4165 is one big magnetic core. There are a whole bunch of cores and shear in 4168, which is why it's given us 3 M-class flares now. That'd be most recently a M1.2 flare, before that an M2.0 flare, and then the first strong solar flare that we had was an M2.9 solar flare. But if you look at this sunspot group, going from the 4th to the 5th, when we had major eruptions at both of those volcanoes, we see significant development and flare activity in this sunspot group, and it has grown more complex, and it's almost like it's feeding off of the emissions, the energy being pumped out of those volcanoes. And here we see that really nicely with our past 3 days of X-ray flux, which measures this sort of light energy emission from the sun from these big explosions that occur on the surface as a result of electromagnetic dynamics. The two things that play are changing magnetic fields, and then also you have these electric circuits with a double layer. And there's a very strong voltage difference between them. And you get this sort of solar flare activity when there are disturbances that pass through that steep electric voltage change. And that causes this explosive release of energy from the surface of the sunspot, which is where this magnetic vortex exists, going from deeper in the sun out to outer space. And so we see this most recent M1.2 right here, and then the M2 there, and the M2.9, nearly an M3 flare back here on the 3rd. This was at 1400 Universal Time. This one right there was at 5 a.m. Universal Time, and this one here was at 2 a.m. Universal Time. Here's the deal. Kamchatka is UTC plus 12. So when it is noon in this data here, which is just normal universal time, that means it's midnight in Kamchatka. Now, as it relates to these volcanoes facing the sun, that means it needs to be daylight there. And so at noon, you will have the sun effectively overhead. You'll notice that most of these solar flares cluster around that midnight period for universal time, meaning it's when Kamchatka is facing the sun directly. This is basically dawn right there, going all the way through dusk, and then we see it really active here right after noon Kamchatka time. And so it almost seems that there is a resonance that's developed between the activity on Kamchatka and our sun itself, and therefore perhaps we can forecast what the solar activity may look like just in the near term based off of what's happening in Kamchatka. And these volcanoes are not letting up, and that leads me to believe, or at least assign a higher probability of there being a significant solar flare stronger than these. I would say probably M5 going up to the X-class range, or really an X-class flare is probably pretty likely as a result of this ongoing just massive churning of Earth energy. And to see this really clearly, let's look at our magnetogram view for the Earth-facing side of the sun for the past 2 days, which we can do here. This is 416A right there. This is 4165. This is the area with the rapid enhancements and increase in magnetic flux. You'll see that at the beginning, it was just like a few spots, kind of like just, like we get these 3 negative cores there, but then we get this big push of positive activity with the green and the blue, and all of a sudden that causes an immense amount of shearing here with the negative polarities, which necessarily increase as well. So there's a tremendous amount of growth and mixing and clustering within this sunspot group. It is not the biggest that we've ever seen on the sun, but it is notable and certainly has the potential for an X-class flare. Let's give it a closer look. Here we have our culprit 4168, and so the question that I have is this going to give us a stronger M-class flare or even an X-class flare or potentially multiple? That is all within the realm of possibility, especially if we start to get some movement between 4165 and 4168. That'd be pretty surprising, but strange things happen on the sun, or even perhaps a growth of a whole bunch of new magnetic flux in between them. All of a sudden, you got a mega sunspot group on the sun. This formed in a very similar fashion. There was nothing there until all of a sudden it just manifested. So that is a possibility as well. But this is a big sunspot group. If it continues to flare, even in just like that low to moderate M-class range, that could continue to feed activity to these volcanoes. If this solar volcano resonance that looks like exists does indeed exist, or there's at least some conduit and pathway of energy, some percentage flows down that path. We know that the sun and the earth are connected together at magnetic fields, so, and also the electric circuit dynamics. That's all well within the realm of possibility. It certainly happens probably all the time, but it's our ability to actually be able to observe these dynamics and correctly understand what is happening that's probably the biggest limiting factor. The other thing to keep in mind here is that, let's say this continues to grow big and then it has an X-class flare. What type of volcanic activity may that trigger? Or conversely, if we get a really big eruption, let's say we do have Khrushchev just totally lose it. Could that then perhaps feed this become a solar flare monster? If there is a bidirectionality that exists, these I would say are both possibilities. I'm not sure the likelihood, but I think it's actually quite high. We're leading to something. After this magnitude 8.8 megaquake, it was almost like the dominoes fell, and now we're leading up to something. This is suggested by the planetary resonances, which come to exact moment on August 9th when we have the full moon and also a Saturn-Neptune-Mars alignment with harmonic configurations to Pluto and also Uranus. So while also there is a Jupiter-Venus conjunction unfolding just a few days later. So something big is brewing according to the planetary resonances, and we have these initial starting conditions, you could say, with our Earth and with our Sun, examining the two most active spots right now, Kamchatka on the eastern coast of Russia, and then, of course, this sunspot group right here, 4168, and perhaps 4165 also joins in on the party. And to wrap up, this all started with that magnitude 8.8 earthquake, and that triggered the volcanic activity. That much seems to be very clear at this moment in time, and the explanation connecting them is not that difficult. So here we have a simple diagram of subduction. We have our oceanic crust here, this oceanic lithosphere. They're subducting under continental crust. This is denser, this is less dense. And so there's this natural chemical differentiation that also exists between them. For example, you'll get like more sodium and potassium, where you'll get like more iron and manganese and more between the two different types of crust. So there's a lot of different factors that causes this oceanic crust to fold underneath the continental crust. And this is a very energetic process. You get parts of the fault locked up, and you also get this chemical differentiation process that also occurs due to water and other elements and minerals that then causes there to be volcanism and create these island arcs or these volcano chains or more. And we see this all across the globe with subduction zones. Well, if you get a big rupture, look at how the land changes. This is just illustrated, but here it's all bunched up and then it finally expands because this is getting pulled in, then it eventually rebounds, and that's what creates that tsunami. And we know that earthquake was quite large based off of the tsunami waves that hit the coast of Kamchatka just nearby and some of our tidal gauge data from around the Pacific. So this was a big earthquake. These seismic waves propagated out in all directions, as we see here with our North American and Eurasian seismic network. Look how the ground motion gets really amplified with those surface waves. That is red for motion up and blue for motion down. So this was a huge ping that was felt worldwide. And in fact, there has been a continuing earthquake swarm at Kamchatka with multiple magnitude 6 earthquakes as well, continuing this release of energy. It's possible that we actually get a doublet. So that would be another magnitude 8.5 or greater, or you could get an aftershock less than magnitude 8.5. These are all well within the realm of possibility because earthquakes act as a trigger for new activity that may or may not occur. Rather than it's a one-time final event, now the door is actually closed. It's actually opening up the door for more activity. But imagine these seismic waves going through these magma filamentary networks that meet up in some magma reservoir fairly close to the surface. That's going to cause a lot of pressure changes to those high pressure fluids trapped within pores. That also alters the stress dynamics of those rocks themselves. That can cause microfractures. All of a sudden you get more space and volume and current flow to flow through this area, and that can increase the volcanic activity. So then the question is, how does that affect the sun? Like, does this cause a release of plasma going up out of the earth really quickly? We see with earthquakes and powerful earthquake lights, plasma doesn't like to stick around. It typically shoots straight up to space. If there's a magnetic field that can pull it right into the sun, hey, it's going to do that. So is it feeding this sunspot group? And then the sunspot group likewise is feeding this whole area back in kind? It just demonstrates, I think, that there is a resonance that's developed between Kamchatka and also the sun right now with sunspot group 4168. And I don't think that resonance is about to peter out. I think it's actually growing and amplifying at this moment in time. That resonance first developed with that magnitude 8.8 megaquake, which occurred at 23:24 Universal Time, which again, Kamchatka's UTC plus 12. So that was effectively right before noon. We've been seeing these volcanic eruptions happen during daytime in Kamchatka, and we've been seeing these solar flares stack around midnight Universal Time which is local time for Kamchatka noon. And again, the key data really is this logarithmic graph of radiative power as observed by MODIS, link in the video description, looking at the summit caldera and basically measuring that heat flow and that energy. We see this being measured in watts there. And again, this goes back to 2024, shows a clear increase starting in July. And then that magnitude 8.8 was at the end of the month. So it was not triggered by that earthquake. This was starting before then. We did have a magnitude 7.4 aftershock Kamchatka on July 20th. That would be somewhere right in around here. But this is clearly already active before that earthquake, indicating that that system was already receiving information that that earthquake was going to occur, and that was changing the behavior here. So that is very, very interesting. And what we don't know is if this is going to like go into the extreme territory. Is this about to cool off, or is it maybe fed by this solar resonance going to reach completely new levels? And we're going to get a big volcanic eruption that could lower global temperatures. That could put a lot of ash up into the stratosphere. These plumes are getting close, the tallest being again 10,700 meters. So we're inching up there. And if we do get a big eruption, now we're changing the larger atmospheric and climate dynamics of the Earth, which is something that's going to affect us for years or perhaps even decades to come, depending on the VEI scale of that eruption. So all eyes are on the sun now, because in addition to this sunspot group right there, we also have this coronal hole, which has been active on the sun now for 12 rotations. This is its 12th rotation. It goes all the way back to October when we had that nearly G5 geomagnetic storm. After that big burst of solar activity with Shu-Chin Shan, we've had this coronal hole, and it has trans-equatorial components to it. It was loading the Earth with these coronal hole high-speed streams for months before that magnitude 8.8 megaquake. So you start to see the space weather Earth geophysics system that exists. So this is very, very important. It is a positive polarity. The interesting thing about that is most people would consider that means its energy deflects around the Earth. And it certainly is not a negative polarity, which can trigger some strong geomagnetic storming, these magnetic field fluctuations. But when it's positive, you have these stable magnetic field configurations northward, connecting at the auroral circuit called Birkeland currents. These are field-aligned currents. So the flow of energy is also the magnetic field in the same direction. Basically, it's like charging a battery, right? You put the terminal on both sides, just pump that energy right in, and that goes directly into the global electric circuit. So you don't have that dynamic when it's in negative polarity. You have a completely different dynamic, which is also very relevant and significant as it relates to Earth geophysics. But these sort of northward aligned magnetic fields, they seem to really like supercharge the core of the Earth itself. And if you have more heat, more expansion, that also can push on these weak points, these volcanoes, and cause increased magma flow, and just overall heats the Earth up more. And the natural mechanism to cool things back down is then a big volcanic eruption. So it's a system which is self-stabilizing across geologic time, but for us here on the surface, it can be really wild. So we hope that nothing happens, but this is your advance heads up. Rotation number 12 is coming. Whether or not this does anything, we have been seeing some activity there, as you can tell. It appears to have started to close up, but look at this. We even get like devil horns right there. So I'm not sure what you see with that coronal hole. We see this one there started to peter out right as it got to geoaffected, but that does mean there was this magnetic field connection between the sun and the Earth during all these volcanic eruptions. So that could be the mechanism right there explaining that. And then what this will bring in being so much larger, and most of that is actually still out of view. If you're seeing this for the first time, this is maybe like a third the total size of this coronal hole, unless it's significantly changed and gotten smaller since rotation 11. this is still very active and in play, suggesting that perhaps something bigger is coming. This magnitude 8.8 was still just a crescendo piece up to a larger event. That is certainly possible. And that is what I'll keep you up to date on. If you subscribe to the channel, thank you all so much for watching. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. Smash that like button to help this channel grow, and join the community before we blast past 500,000, a million, who knows? But I think in general, everyone likes understanding what's happening with the one planet that we all live on together. So we need to treat each other with respect, with kindness, and we need to do the same for all the life around us and the earth herself. You know, ask the sun for some good favors. Give your thanks to God. These are all things that we can do. Give a blessing to a stranger. I hope that you do a good deed tomorrow. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, wishing you well. I'll see you all in the next video.